Marsh Lopers, welcome to episode 2. I'm Martin Kendrick. And once again, a chance to really focus on why I'm here. Why I, as a writer, choose at this moment to come forward and talk, if I can, about the marshes, about imagination. The reason is that the wetlands that we live in, the marsh itself and the bay in Hamilton, have a toxic narrative. And when I say that, I think you all know what I mean. If we talk of water, we talk of the dumping and the storm overflows and the billions of liters of sewage. And it's crushed my heart. It's hurt myself. It's hurt you. The distrust of the council. Hamilton is, I couldn't say saddened, feels betrayed by this council. And this watershed is a mirror of the difficulties and the issues within this community. So I wanted to bring writing and story and art or imagination and creativity to this conversation and try and not turn the narrative around, but consider the other side. For me, walking through here, it's a sanctuary. And for many years, that's what I would do, just walk through here and enjoy it immensely. But as you walk through, or as I walk through, I began to notice different aspects of it. And I was writing a lot about it. And so while writing about it, I came to know it very well. And then my imagination kicks in and I start to feel perhaps the marshes have their own imagination. Okay, hello Marsh Lopers. Welcome to the world of the marshes. We're going to be having our guest here today. That's Cheryl Fletcher, an award-winning screenwriter who's going to talk about the process she goes through to come up with some pretty great writing.
I've always been passionate about writing.
Well, I only have about 50 minutes, so, give me your pitch.
Yeah, well, I actually sent you the script.
We're also going to be looking at Labyrinth because we were there this week. And labyrinths have a really interesting part to play, not just in Hamilton, which you'll learn, but in the world at large.
You know, I contend, and labyrinth designers and people who lead labyrinth walks contend that it's a therapeutic tool, that you go into a meditative state. It's a walking meditation, like going into a Zen garden. So this is the forming of the labyrinth. It's transforming common space, public space, into sacred space.
Well, today, this is exciting, we're off to the Labyrinth. This is the Labyrinth at St. Joseph's Hospital in Hamilton, downtown up in Charlton. It's a hidden courtyard, and they use it for therapeutic purposes.
Lynn is a writer, a poet, has written fantasy, and I think a labyrinth is a beautiful part. It's certainly in the Marsh loping stories, whether it's labyrinths or other kinds of magical things. So as a writer, it would be good if you took something you're writing about and carried that into the labyrinth and see what came to your mind. Just let it come. Don't try and make it up. Just see what comes to your mind. And carry the intent, I'm writing about, I want to see, right? Yeah. Okay, that's what you do. And then just walk. Let it all go. You'll get to the center, and when you're there, stay for as long as you like, and then you come out again, walking back exactly the same way, and it'll lead you out here. And what they say is you go in with your intent, you get to the center and you reflect upon that, you come out kind of gratefully or maybe not. And at the end, kind of thank you to the mystery of what happened. And then often takes a day or two, or right at the minute, right in the center you'll find this, but it often takes a day or two for this to settle into your mind and to say, wow, that was true. And when you write the next time, you'll be amazed, I believe, at what might come. It's like it triggers the unconscious and sends those contents into your conscious mind, and suddenly you're able to express things that weren't there before because you couldn't quite see or feel them. So, with that instruction, go quiet and just enter the labyrinth. And I'll hold your thoughts in mind while I'm here. I always say this to anybody who's walking. So you're coming to the labyrinth. It's good to take a moment to reflect on why you're there. So you just sit quietly at the beginning, and maybe you're going in whatever it is that you want to hold. So carry any intent. I want to take my friend in here with me and walk and see what I see. And you just open up, intend for yourself, open up, and then just let it go. And all you're going to do is you're walking, and you'll follow the pattern. So those turns will lead you to the center, even though you'll be very close and very far away and you won't know. Trust that it goes to the center, and just let your mind walk these laneways, let everything go, carry that intent, and find your own way and pace. People think of labyrinths and they think of mazes because historically that's what happened, but a maze is unpredictable. It's a puzzle. It's very male-oriented. If you're really good and clever, you can find the way to the center of a maze. And if you get to the middle of a maze, historically, mythically, there's a centaur. You're confronting a shadow, a conflict, and you have to defeat it. But a labyrinth, which is what this is, a labyrinth, is a unicursal path, circular path, which every single laneway here, there's 11 of them, that will take you into the center. And you will always land there, no matter how far away you think you are. And it's like life itself. It's a pathway, and it leads to the very center, but you're kind of twisting, turning, winding, and wandering, having no idea where you're going, but you know that a labyrinth will take you right to the center at the very end. And there is a center. It's called the Rose Cross. So in the middle, it would be good now just to sit quietly and just reflect upon as if something happened. So, walking into the labyrinth, you might have felt yourself settling within your mind. And maybe your body changed. It might be so, and in the center, you begin to connect with those feelings that have arisen during the walk. And as you're sitting and reflecting, insights may come. Because what happens in the labyrinth is that the mind switches gears. It goes into what is called a right brain altered state. And it's that state, like what you get into in meditation, that leads to the insight and understanding that seems to come when you've reached the center and are sitting there. So now, when that feeling, when that insight is completed at the center and you feel ready, you arise and walk out again, knowing that exactly the same way you come in, you're retracing your steps, and you will come back out into the world almost like a shaman. You go off somewhere to a place, you find insight, you return, you come out to the world, and you communicate that to yourself and to those who are around you, who perhaps need to hear what you've reflected upon. But really, you've gained insight into yourself, insight into the larger patterns in which you're involved in your own life. Also, when you're walking, as you walk, you'll find that you kind of stumble, you walk into a pattern and suddenly your walk becomes rhythmic, you find. And so the mind starts to settle down, the mind settles down, and then suddenly you're in another kind of space in your mind. The sun opens up, you hear the birds, you hear what's around you, you hear what's within you. And the very thing you came to walk the labyrinth for, people usually come with an intent. Oh, I got to walk to the center and do a little bit of prayer. They come to a realization. Something opens in them. And as you get to the center, you just settle. And say it's grief. You settle into your grief and something comes to you, a kind of intuition. Or it's a joyful remembrance, and suddenly you're feeling very different than when you walked in. So that's why people walk, is to come to some glimmer of understanding, an insight. And the labyrinth is famous for that historically. So, welcome back, Lynn.
Thanks.
How was the walk?
Good.
Do you think it would, any insight come about writing or anything you were?
I think it would help with the anxiety
Ah,
of the writing process
right.
when you get stuck and you feel like nobody's listening. So,
Yeah.
Would you do it again?
yes, I would. For sure. I'd walk it again.
It'd be interesting to see if you made it a practice. You know, you did it for 2 or 3 times a week, just to see what happened at the end of that, how your writing or yourself might change a bit, maybe.
Grow.
Yeah.
For sure.
Cool.
So you're gonna go home and write like crazy now?
Yeah.
I want to say, really, how astonished I was, and I am, that labyrinths came into my life. But that's really not unusual for a writer. The luckiness, the gratitude I felt for becoming a writer who could write publicly for magazines, for newspapers, for radio, what have you, because it allowed me access to many, many people. And I realized after a while, if I could write in these magazines, I could choose the stories I wanted to write. And sometimes if somebody came to me with an idea, I would listen and say, well, I can do that. I would love to hear about that. And as a writer, I recognized in myself that I was listening so much more carefully to people and engaged with their stories. If it interested me, that interest elicited from them a full story of something that I, of course, became interested and could be fascinated by. Well, the Labyrinth came that way. I was speaking one day at a conference, and I was speaking about mindfulness. It was at a conference of neurofeedback and biofeedback around states of consciousness. And as a writer, I had experienced writing as being able to navigate different states of consciousness carefully, precisely, and thoughtfully, after learning to kind of indulge in it. But the beautiful thing was when this person told me about labyrinths, and I went to walk one, and I listened to the instructor, and he says, just walk in, pay attention to what you want to pay attention to, listen to yourself, hear what you need to know. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do it. And I stand before the labyrinth, beautiful pattern. I'd seen them in India, but here it was so complex and beautiful to me. And I walked it with a number of others, and I felt in the center, and actually on walking out, that I had been unburdened. I had been lightened. I felt just like I was floating out of that labyrinth. And there was I wouldn't say no clear reason. I had asked the labyrinth, how would this work for my creativity? How would this work for a character in a book? How is the labyrinth meaningful to my experience as a writer? And I sort of put it that way. It was a loose question. But along that walk, I had a cascade of dreamlike images that brought both the labyrinth as a process, as a mindful process, a meditation, and the experience I was feeling in my body, heart, and mind. It turned out that the labyrinth became a significant part of my work. So I began to build and design labyrinths.
I think this is the center where the truck is.
Yeah.
Is a perimeter of the labyrinth.
The entrance must go to the northeast, as all labyrinths do. And so to find that in our landscape and to set up these stones so that others could come and walk it. And I myself could use it in my practice.
Yeah, here it is.
But it's really important to know that Hamilton is very significantly involved in the labyrinth movement. Indeed, you may not know that the labyrinth is a peace, the official peace symbol of the city of Hamilton, recognized as such by the International Cities of Peace and by our own council by unanimous consent, along with the Peace Pole or Peace Garden.
3,
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Off to the center. Okay, vertical lines are actually going to come this way. So the first vertical line will come here. And you can make it even coming, yes, good idea. Right where you are, just a bit. Just to bring it back in line with this energy. Come here, come, right about there. So now we know when we move through this that all our lines are very carefully joined from the center, going to a center. So this is the forming of the labyrinth. It's transforming space, common space, public space, into sacred space. These are temporary temples. It's a beautiful thing. Now, I would say I have taken at least 100 writers through the labyrinth. Every single artist, creator, writer has an experience they felt was worthy of walking the labyrinth, and almost all of them continue to do so.
So, for instance, if you're walking through and there's this bridge in the distance, well, that bridge separates the two worlds of the marsh. And in the story, there's the mutant marshes and there's the magic marshes. This area that we're in is the magic marsh. I've just come down a river or a stream bed, and that's the stream that leads into the desolate swamp. Great heroic quests take part in the desolate swamps as you're going through. It's anyone who has some task to fulfill has to come out through the desolate swamps. And, you know, people fear to go there, or the old ones fear to go there, because it has a power of its own, the desolate swamp. And to go through there, to kind of walk through the darkness, and you come to a light, and the light is in the far distance, over the dell or the island. And the island is where the old ones gather.
Welcome back to the show, Tales of Paradise Marsh. I'm Martin Kendrick. As promised, we have in the studio with us today Cheryl Fletcher. Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, Martin. Thanks for having me on today.
Cheryl, you started out, I understand, writing tween novels. What was that like? How did you get started?
Well, I was an avid reader as a child, and I was crazy about Judy Blume, who I always thought wrote these books that were so relatable and so real. I often would wonder where these characters lived and how much I'd love to meet them. And I promised myself when I was younger, because I've always been passionate about writing, that one day I would also write similar books. So she was really my inspiration. And my daughter was about 14 at the time, 15 at the time, and going through all the things you do with girls, I thought, I'm going to start my first book, and I'm going to call it Vow of Friendship. And my daughter's nickname is Tissy, so I created the character Tissy Matthews. And I just wanted to write a book again that was very similar to everyday life. Things that were taking place that kids could relate to, everything from bullying to kindness to inclusion. So that was my first book. And I was fortunate to have that published with Books for Pleasure, which is a Canadian publisher. And then I went on to write my second book about my experience in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, when I would stay with my cousins for the summer. They had this really old house, which the little girl across the street convinced me was haunted. So I had this wonderful summer with this supposed ghost living in the attic, and I called that one My Creepy Summer. And then I wrote my third, which is titled Secrets I Know, just about sometimes the pressure that kids have when they've got a parent that is not, your typical parent. And in this case, one of the characters comes into the school and she's new, and her parent is an alcoholic. So I did, a little bit of research and wanted to approach that subject very gently. And my group of characters in my books befriend her, and then she ends up moving away at the end of the book. But just to give a little insight as to what it's like to be a child living with a parent that's an alcoholic. And I have a plan for my fourth book, which I'm going to call Camp Fright, but I've just not gotten to that yet because I just kind of switched over to screenwriting, and I've been there ever since.
Okay, so you give a hint there, but you're writing now screenplays. A little different, I suspect, than tween, or is it connected?
I had always had this I call it swirling thought. So I had always had this swirling thought while I was writing my little books. I love indie films, and I wanted to write this, kind of low budget indie film about this family. And I kind of envisioned it taking place in a small town like Bridgewater or any of the smaller towns around Hamilton. So it's called The Paper Girl. And that was my first screenplay that I wrote. And I was very fortunate that when I pitched my 3 books to a producer in Montreal named Natalie Dumoulin, she kind of gave me this really fast education on screenwriting because we had to write a treatment for that project. So I got my feet wet, and then I read a ton of screenplays online, and then I got to know the format, and then I wrote The Paper Girl. So that was my first screenplay, and then I was just in love. I've just been writing for TV and film since then. Never thought I could write for TV. I thought, wow, that's just way too hard. But I did. And now, if anything, I tend to write more projects for TV than I do for film.
So Cheryl, can you explain the writing process you use? Like, how do you do it?
I'm kind of all over the map. There's times that I have a process and I do everything I should do, according to writing rules. And I have an outline and I do a ton of research, and then I write out all my different acts and the whole bit. But then there's times where I go about it almost in a backwards way, and because I've developed so many relationships with producers, I'll actually reach out to the producers first with even just a synopsis or a log line and say, here's what I'm thinking of writing, would you be interested in it? And that gives me the opportunity to get feedback from producers who say, well, it reminds me of such and such, or wow, there's nothing out there like that right now, or yeah, I'd love to see, I'd love to have the first refusal, blah, blah, blah. So that's what I've been doing recently. But the way I'm so blessed, because most of my ideas just come to me. I kind of look at it as a snowball. So it could be just a small snowball. And then as time goes on, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Some end 3/4 of the way, and I put them on the back burner, hoping that the rest of, it will come to me. But a lot of times these projects come to me just almost fully complete. So there's this huge race for me to get it down on paper. And that's really what it's been like for me. So I know I have a lot of friends that get writer's block and they go through years without writing, but I've not experienced that yet.
So Cheryl, we got something interesting here. I know you were doing your writing, but I just heard that you were in an award-winning short film. We're going to show a clip of it now.
So, okay, I'm kind of hearing what you're saying here. But, we have to go big with this, okay? So the pervert, I'm thinking John Hamm.
Okay, so are you talking about one of the characters?
Yeah.
Well, I don't. John Hamm wouldn't work for. If you're referencing Ronald, he wouldn't work for Ronald because Ronald's about 5'4", paunchy.
Okay, so if John Hamm it is, we are like brothers. We got drunk at Ham's, and the guy loves it. So I'm thinking Taiwan. Can we shoot it in Taiwan?
This movie in Taiwan?
Yes.
No, actually, I said that in my email. It's pretty important. It's shot in Massachusetts, and I'll tell you why. The character is. Can I help you?
What I think you need for your film is a strong black lead. Listen to me. These zombie criminals takes over the city, so they have to hire this vampire detective to. And the way he kills these people off is using a high-powered water gun with megaphones that makes really piercing noise. Did I mention the lead's name? Derek.
And what's your name, sir?
Derek.
Oh, big surprise. Yeah, I don't think so, buddy. Please, come on. Move
I would
along,
think
all right?
I would think that'd be a great idea.
Okay, not this time.
Black Lives Matter.
I don't know how they're all aged. Do you know any of these people?
No.
Oh, they're all eavesdropping as they grew up. Okay.
I can see it's a film about pitching to producers. So is that what it's really like in your experience?
They certainly are. That was based on real experience. That was so much fun to make. It won third place for most entertaining film, and it also won for best behind the scenes. So we're really pleased with that. That was a project that I collaborated with my friend Scott Newman. We had so much fun writing it. It was hard to get through it actually because it was so funny and so typical. But that's just based on my experience driving into Toronto many, many times, meeting with some producers, some that were, fantastic still in my life, others that really don't even know why I went there other than to buy them a coffee and some treats to take home. And but yeah, it's certainly a frustrating process. That's what I think I had to deal with more in the beginning, where I was just a newbie in the industry, so I didn't want to say no to any potential meetings. But I've certainly had some crazy ones, and that little short is based on my experience, and we had so much fun filming it.
Well, Cheryl, thank you for coming. That was pretty interesting.
Thank you so much for having me, and good luck. I can't wait to watch it.
We'll be back next week with other writers, other guests, other explorations of the marshes. I'm Martin Kendrick, Tales of Paradise Marsh. Thanks for watching.
Leanne had this sitting in her home, and she is very, very, very attached to it, and the meaning it has. And so when it travels from her home, and it's delivered to this site, delivered by her son Adam, and it's set within the ground, it was a moment of great meaning to me, for her, but for this city, that we could actually institute, and possibly across the city, spread the message of peace.
This garden is not mine. It is not yours. It is ours. It belongs to whomever comes to walk the labyrinth, to sit and rest, to reflect on peace within oneself, within community, within the world.